Welcome, everyone, to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations that explore diverse topics and stories impacting our Asian Pacific American communities. I'm your host, Joanne Whitlock, and we have an incredibly inspiring guest with us today. Storytelling, identity, and social change are at the heart of her work. A Philippine X American writer, independent scholar, and performer, Jen Soriano has spent years working at the intersection of grassroots organizing, narrative justice, and art-driven activism. As the award-winning author of Nervous, a groundbreaking lyrical essay collection on mental health and psychology, and co-editor of Closer to Liberation, Pina activism in theory and practice, Jen challenges conventional storytelling and amplifies marginalized voices. With a background from Harvard and an MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshop, this literary and activist powerhouse continues to push boundaries and inspire change. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Jen Soriano to Asian Pacific Voices. Hi, Jen. How are you?
Hi, Joanne. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. A fellow Filipina. I'm always happy to. So I just want to get right into it and get to the core of your work. We have so much to cover. It's kind of going over all your resume and your social media. I'm very excited to have you here. So you've worked at the intersection of art and activism for years. What first inspired you to use storytelling as a tool for social change?
It was a couple things. Actually, the first thing, and maybe you'll identify with this as a fellow Filipina, is this feeling of invisibility that I grew up with. I did not read a story by a Filipino author, or much less a Filipino author, by or about a Filipino community until I was 21. And it took me even longer than that to realize that invisibility is actually by design, that it's actually a product of colonial erasure. And so I felt really inspired to do my small part to correct that and to start helping other invisibilized communities, including our own community, tell more of our own stories. And the second thing was when I started working as a journalist. I was a freelance reporter for Mother Jones, and I came up to Seattle to cover the 1999 battle in Seattle against the WTO. And so I was out in the street for 12 hours a day, basically interviewing protesters and having an amazing time because protesters were playing music, they were dancing, they were singing, they were having a blast. But then meanwhile, what showed up in the newspaper stands were front page headlines and photos of protesters, quote unquote, causing violence. And so that realization that mainstream stories don't always tell the truth, don't always tell the whole truth, and often don't tell the stories of marginalized and targeted people and underdogs, made me want to correct that or help correct that in both my work and my art.
That's great. I mean, with the rise of social media, it's always a battle with, fake news, quote, quote, fake news and what's really out there. So it's amazing that you're taking a proactive approach against that. Your book, Nervous, takes a unique lyrical approach to exploring mental health, which is something I personally haven't actually seen an approach like that way before. So how did you develop that form of storytelling? And what do you hope the readers take away from it?
It's kind of compulsive. It just kind of, it's like, oh, that's what comes out. And honestly, it was a process, maybe less of developing than of allowing, because the lyricism that you describe is something that, in the literature world can be frowned upon because it can be looked at as, oh, you just can't decide what you're writing. Are you writing poetry or are you writing prose? It doesn't fit in a genre, like you're confused. And for me, it's just what comes out of my body, honestly. And so I was lucky to have a couple really amazing mentors in my MFA program who encouraged this type of hybridity and who introduced me to a lot of different authors who write lyric essay, who write, hard to categorize, poemy, prose-ish, song lyric-ish things. And so when I had, that encouragement and permission from my mentors, and also had amazing examples. For example, Banu Kapil, Jamie Nakamura Lin, who recently wrote a speculative memoir called The Night Parade, which combines mythology and memoir. Having examples like that really gave me the courage and the permission to write whatever came out somatically from my body. And there is a craft element to it as well that I had to develop, but I would say that it really was a process of permission and allowing what kind of organically is the way that I experience the world.
I think that's great, because I always hear about artists just not being able to fully express themselves, or they're trapped in the box of whatever kind of organization that they're in. So I love that you had that freedom to be able to do that. Going back to some of your other works, and your experience as a Philippine X American, in Multiplicity from the Margins, you explore how intersectional forms can disrupt oppressive narratives. Can you share how your own identity has influenced that approach?
Yes. So that essay grew out of my being influenced by Black feminism, right, which is where the concept and praxis of intersectionality comes from. And basically, I was trying to understand how some books that I really admired were able to fit so much different types of information into one package. And what I realized is that each of those authors, like Banu Kapil, who I'd mentioned before, was writing in what I started to describe as intersectional form. And the basis of that really is an approach which allows and gives permission the author to write their multiple identities on the page. So not just one identity, right? Like you don't have to just fit into one box, but multiple identities, multiple intersecting identities, and then to be able to write from those multiple perspectives, which I believe can absolutely help undermine oppressive narratives, because oppressive narratives often are stereotyping narratives that only allow us to be one thing, right? Like all Asians are good at math, right? Or like, all Asians are, back in the day, the story was all Asians carry yellow fever, right? So, as opposed to these stereotypes that are very harmful, intersectional form allows the agency of a marginalized author to be able to expand into everything that we are, as opposed to fitting into models and stereotypes. And so for me in Nervous, just to give a quick example, that looked like being able to write not just as a Filipino-American, or, for example, just as a biologist, right, about nervous system trauma, but as a Filipinx American biologist and historian who is a second-generation immigrant who was kind of divorced from my history, but then was be able to discover colonial history as a source of this biological phenomena of trauma. And so being able to put that all together was part of the sort of freeing and liberating aspect of writing this book.
That's amazing, because that hits home so hard to me. And it's so inspiring to hear you say that about multiple identities and just kind of being able to speak to all parts of that. I was born and raised in the Philippines. And when my family immigrated here to the States, it was in the deep South. Definitely felt out of place, then found my place there. But then we moved back to the Philippines, didn't know how to speak Tagalog anymore, lost that. And then I felt completely out of place there. And so I definitely understand the, having this kind of identity crisis within yourself. And then growing up, nursing was the thing for all Filipinas to be doing. That's definitely not the pathway that, I took. And so there was just a lot of kind of stereotypes that you're talking about that you've had to deal with. And so that is definitely high on my reading list to finish your work on that.
Oh, that's great.
So with with literature, obviously that's historically centered dominant narratives. So what are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that you think for AAPIs and other marginalized writers today from your experience?
Okay, so I'm going to start answering that question by actually separating it out, the Pacific Islander, the PI from AAPI, because actually I think that, one of the biggest challenges to AAPI writers having our stories kind of collectively matter more is that Pacific Islanders actually face really different conditions from Asian Americans when it comes to the barriers of telling their stories and having their stories matter. And I think that's just important to name, because I think that, Asian Americans, including increasingly Southeast Asian American authors, are having a bit of a renaissance of more and more representation and more stories getting written by us across genre. And Pacifica writers just don't have as many opportunities, and they face more invisibilization. And so I think that Asian American writers have a responsibility to lift up our Pacifica brethren in their pursuits of literature. And there's lots of people to follow who are kind of consolidating and aggregating Pacifica authors, including I believe it's called the Island Pacific Collective on Instagram is something to check out. I don't think I got that name exactly right, but it's, I think it's really important for us to be able to, if we're going to in solidarity be a category of AAPI, we have to actually acknowledge sort of the differences in conditions between these communities. And Pacific Islander, let's see, no, I don't really remember the name of the publishing company. It's maybe Pacific Islander Books. So people should check that out, Pacific Islander Books. But then as a whole, I think that, we have an opportunity, I'll put it this way, as AAPI writers to be able to come together more and actually have our stories matter on the level of political power. Because like I said, we have more and more poets, we have more and more, essayists, more and more novelists. And yet that hasn't quite coalesced into a place where our stories are matching. The number of our stories are matching kind of our power on a national political scale. For example, right now there's a lot of Asian and Pacific Islander people being targeted for deportation, but that doesn't get talked about as much. And so, I think that authors who write about all kinds of things, even if it's like sci-fi and aliens, or manananggals, like we have platforms to be able to come together to lift up our communities in the social and political realm as well.
You have such a great influence in our community. I love listening to you talk about that. We've introduced, or I've interviewed so many people on the show, and I've never actually heard somebody try to separate out Asian American Pacific Islanders, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, our experience for sure as Filipinos and Southeast Asians is very different from mainland Asian Americans' experience. So that's not something that's actually discussed quite a bit. So I love hearing that. Quick break from your written work. I want to go to some of the organizations that you have co-founded. You've co-founded cultural democracy organizations like MediaJustice and ReFrame. So how do you see art and literature playing in dismantling harmful systems and building new ones? And tell us a little bit about those two organizations.
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking. It's such a fun opportunity to be able to put together all these different parts of my life in an interview. That doesn't usually happen. So thank you. It's a very intersectional form interview.
Of course. Did a lot of research on you.
It's awesome. So MediaJustice and ReFrame are what I call cultural democracy institutions. And MediaJustice is specifically focused on democratizing the platforms that we use to tell our stories. So holding, big tech platforms accountable for bias, and also supporting the success of community-based platforms, such as this one. And ReFrame is an organization that is dedicated to more of what you would call kind of the software. MediaJustice is looking at the hardware, like the platforms, and ReFrame is looking at the stories, the content, right, the narratives, and is trying to help organizations who do community organizing and advocacy at some level, from local to state to national to international, be able to organize stories about constituents, say immigrants, queer and trans people, and and organize those stories in a way that they can have more power in the public debate. And that also is keeping track of kind of counter narratives and dominant narratives that that might have to be factored in to be able to have communities' values and visions heard. So, I look at my writing as just one really small piece contributing to kind of that software or the content of, the stories of underdogs. And I think that the power of art and literature, especially in these times, is to act as a beacon for other underdogs who might feel alone and isolated, who might feel unworthy because they're being told that they don't exist or shouldn't exist or are disposable. And I think that art and literature at its best can be a beacon to say, you belong, you matter, you're worthy, you're not alone. And together we can do something to realize a better world. And so there's also this part of being a beacon that's about being a beacon for visions of better times, and for being champions of, some basic values like decency and kindness and fairness. I mean, I think all great literature actually is about, something like that, or the lack of it.
I think in our current landscape in this country, no matter what is, what side some people may be on, I think this is needed more than ever now to definitely, like you said, serve as a beacon for those who feel like they may not have anywhere to speak or anywhere to not represented. So I think this is more than ever, these organizations like yours are really, really important. Turn on the news anytime, any given time of the day, and you just see all these marginalized communities everywhere on the news. I mean, so I think having that and having organizations like yours to kind of uplift us marginalized communities is what we need right now in the current political landscape, as little as I can say about that.
Thank you. Yeah, shout out to all of the workers at MediaJustice and ReFrame who are keeping that going.
Awesome. So kind of piggyback on what you were just saying, how has writing about mental health been a part of your own healing process? And what advice do you have for others who want, to do the same, to write about deeply personal topics?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is great, do it, but are you sure you want to do it? No, I'm just kidding. I mean, no, great, do it. Definitely write about personal topics and make sure that you have a good support network while you do it. Because for me, in writing about mental health and trauma, I did find a lot of medicine in it. It was like narrative medicine. And that actually is an actual term, right, in kind of the healthcare world, sort of the more progressive healthcare world, around how being able to piece together different parts of your experience and also kind of take agency over what can be a really dehumanizing process, engaging with the Western medical system, right? Like being able to put together all these different pieces into your own narrative can be healing in and of itself. But at the same time, as is true of most medicines, it doesn't necessarily go down easy, right? And it can have side effects. And so for me, in the process of writing this book, I had to have a lot of support. I had a lot of cry sessions with friends. I made sure that, I have a bathroom right next to my office, and I had to make sure that nobody else in my family was using it while I was writing, because sometimes I just have to go and lock myself in the bathroom for like half an hour. And I had to be going through therapy. I absolutely had to be seeing my therapist while I was writing this book. And so, not everybody might need professional help while they're writing personal stories, but some people do. And I think the main message really is, if it feels hard to write personal stuff, it's because it is. And take that seriously. And the ways that you're revisiting difficult moments in your life could trigger you and bring you back into a space that might not feel good. And so being easy on ourselves in the sense of acknowledging that this is hard, and getting the support for it is really key, because in the outside world, people who aren't writers might have a hard time understanding that sitting at your keyboard, all day is actually a really hard thing. They're like, why are you crying? All you're doing is typing. And actually, that's not true. You're, doing a lot of mining and excavating of things that will require support to sort through.
I think that's something people really need to hear, because, us viewers and readers and listeners of art and work, we only see the finalized product. We see this amazing piece of work, this final thing, and we don't see the background, like everything, all the steps that, came or went into making that, writing that, or making the music, or making, so it's always nice to hear, or not nice, we talk about the struggles of it, but it's always good to see
It's
that
real.
the reality of the products that you give us. So thank you for that. So then what advice do you have for young writers, and especially those from the underrepresented backgrounds and marginalized communities who want to share their stories? Kind of, we talked about it a little bit, we gave a little bit of advice, but, those who feel uncertain about where to actually start, not necessarily why they should, but kind of what advice do you have for the young writers?
I would say go for it. Have faith in your own story. Like, we need your stories. We need them more than ever. And that's not to put pressure on you, but to say that, what can feel like just a weird hobby to some people, is actually really important. And so I would just say, carve out time for it, even if it feels really, really hard. And then I would say, get writing buddies if you don't have them already. That was absolutely necessary for me to go through the process, is, having at least 1 to 2 people that I actually checked in with weekly around, hey, here's what I've done or not done. And that kind of accountability and support has been really necessary. And I think just on that tip, right, thinking about writing as a community activity has been helpful for me too. So like seeking out classes, I described kind of the co-writing process. That's another way to do it. And if you're looking for, this is a very practical piece of advice, but for young writers who are looking for ways to share their writing, like some maybe you already have like 500 pages of writing, or, like whatever. There's obviously all these different ways to just share over social media, to have a Substack. But if you want to try to publish, I would recommend going to Poets and Writers. They're a fantastic nonprofit organization, and online they have a database of opportunities, of journals to submit to. If you have an entire manuscript, there's contests to submit your manuscript to, publishers where you don't require agents to submit to. So I would just say take advantage of it. It's a free resource, and you can start to see where there might be some open doors to be able to share your work.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that to the listeners. And then what about you now? What's next for you? Do you have any upcoming projects or themes that you're excited to explore? Like, what's your next big thing?
Oh gosh, I'm working on like 7 things at once, which means I'm not sure if I'm actually making any progress on any of them, but I'm thinking a lot about them. And so a few of them are that I'm actually starting to write fiction. And I'm working on a short story collection that started out as a short story collection actually about nuclear impacted communities in the Pacific. It actually started out as an essay collection. And then I was like, I know nothing about nuclear science, so I'm going to turn this into fiction so I can just focus on the human aspect of it. And what's fun about it is that it's now kind of turning into like a speculative fiction set of stories. And I am excited to see where that goes. I'm also working on a novel. And that is also kind of it started out as realist and is now bringing in some magical realism into that as well. Again, this is just sort of like how my body works. It's all just coming in because I sort of, just things are kind of wild and fantastical in real life, I feel like, is how I'm experiencing it. And then I'm working on a second essay collection as well. And I haven't really been telling people about this, so y'all are some of the first outside my circle to know, but I'm working on an essay collection that's about love. And, Nervous was about trauma, but, I thought about it as a love letter to interdependence. Like, love was really kind of the undercurrent of the book, and the love of our interrelatedness and how our interrelatedness can heal. So in the second essay collection, I'm just diving straight into that undercurrent and exploring love, including different Filipino concepts of love.
Yes, I follow you on social media, so I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for any of these upcoming projects. I'm so very excited for you.
Awesome.
So we're coming to the end of our show, unfortunately, but I do want to do a quick, just fun lightning round with you. So ask some random questions and then just give me your answer in less than 30 seconds. Just kind of get to know you a little bit more.
I love it.
If your life was a book title, what would it be?
The Magic School Bus.
Love it. What's your go-to writing snack or ritual that's not going to the bathroom and crying?
Dill pickle chips and sea salt pistachios. They're just both snacks and rituals.
Love it. If you could have dinner with any historical writer or activist, who would it be?
Oh, okay. Definitely Toni Morrison. Ooh. Absolutely. Yeah. I would want to absorb all her oracular wisdom. And I also would want to do a joke standoff and see what made her laugh.
What's one word in Tagalog that you wish had a perfect English translation?
Pagmamahal.
I like that one. If you had to describe your storytelling style in 3 words, what would they be?
Curious and... This is hard. Curious, free range, and musical.
I know there's so many ways to describe your work, so this is definitely a hard one to just encapsulate in 3 words. So awesome. All right. Well, thank you. So thank you for humoring us on that little fun go round.
That's cute.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left today. I do want to thank you, Jen, for joining us on today's show. And if you'd like to learn more about Jen's work, please visit her on Instagram at Jen Soriano Writes. Jen, is there any other social media outlets that you would like to share with anybody?
I'm Jen Soriano Writes on TikTok and Blue Sky as well. And my website's jensoriano.net.
Perfect. Thank you. And then to our listeners, we also want to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future guests or topics, feel free to reach out. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube for more aspiring conversations. Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, or ACMA, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering the Asian and Pacific Islander communities with a voice through media arts. If you'd like to learn more about ACMA or support our program, please visit our website at acmasocal.org. Once again, I'm Joanne Whitlock. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking episode of Asian Pacific Voices Radio. Until then, take care, everyone.